In 1874, Kansas, helping escaped slaves means death. But widowed rancher Ezra McCain cannot turn away the desperate black mother begging for milk at his door. When Delilah Washington arrives with shame burning in her eyes and a dying infant in her arms, Ezra fills her pail and touches her trembling hand, igniting a forbidden connection that will force both to choose between love and survival. Ezra McCain has spent 2 years hiding from his past as an Underground Railroad conductor, but one act of compassion will drag him back into a world where mercy is treason. The flames painted shadows across Ezra McCain's weathered face as his ranch house surrendered to the fire. Smoke twisted into the Kansas night sky like prayers nobody would answer. He clutched a child's wooden toy horse against his chest. The dirt beneath his boots held secrets deeper than any grave. Delilah Washington stepped from the darkness. Tears carved silver paths down her dark cheeks. Her dress hung torn at the sleeves. Her hands trembled. They're coming for us both now. Ezra's knuckles whitened around the toy. The distant thunder carried something else. Hoofbeats. Torchlight flickered through the trees like angry stars. Then we run, tonight. Delilah shook her head. Her eyes held the weight of choices that break souls. You don't understand. I can't. Not after what I've done. Thunder cracked the sky open. Ezra reached for her hand as the torches grew brighter. The wind carried voices, angry voices, hunting voices. 3 months earlier, the same wind had driven rain against Ezra's door like bullets. Cedar Ridge, Kansas squatted on the prairie like a collection of broken teeth. The Civil War had ended, but its ghosts still walked the streets. Union sympathizers eyed Confederate holdouts across muddy roads. Both sides watched their backs. Ezra McCain owned the largest cattle spread within 50 miles. His herds grazed on land that stretched to the horizon. His house stood solid against the elements. 2 years of solitude had carved lines around, his eyes deeper than any plow could cut. The storm that brought Delilah Washington to his door began with hail. Stones the size of marbles drummed against his roof. Lightning split the darkness. Then came the knocking. Soft at first. Desperate. Insistent. Ezra opened the door to find a woman holding a bundle against her chest. Rain had plastered her dress to her thin frame. Her hair hung in wet ropes. Her eyes held shame so deep it seemed to have roots. Please, sir. Her voice barely rose above the storm. Milk for my baby. I got nothing to pay with. The bundle in, her arms stirred. A weak cry escaped the blankets. The sound hit Ezra like a physical blow. He had heard that cry in his dreams for 2 years, the cry his own child never made. Wait here. He returned with a wooden pail. Fresh milk from his best cow. Steam rose from the surface. Delilah's hands shook as she reached for it. Their fingers touched when he passed her the pail. The contact lasted only seconds. Neither pulled away immediately. Lightning illuminated her face. High cheekbones, full lips pressed tight with worry, eyes that had seen too much but hadn't given up hope. Thank you. She turned to leave. The storm's not finished. She stopped, her shoulders tensed. I can't impose. You're not. The barn offered shelter from the rain. Ezra hung a lantern from a beam. Yellow light danced across hay bales and farming tools. Delilah settled in a corner with her child. She fed the baby with careful movements. Each drop of milk was precious. You traveling far? West. Her answer came quick, practiced. Lost my husband to fever, looking for work. The lie sat between them like smoke. Ezra heard it, but didn't challenge it. Everyone carried lies in this country. Some lies kept people alive. I could use help around the house, cooking, cleaning. The work's honest, the pay's fair. Delilah looked up from the baby. Suspicion flickered in her eyes. Why would you help me? Ezra studied her face in the lamplight. She was younger than he'd thought. Maybe 25. Old enough to know the world's cruelty. Young enough to still fight it. Maybe I need the help more than you need the work. The baby finished feeding. Color had returned to its small face. Delilah wrapped the child carefully. Her movements spoke of practice born from necessity. People in town won't take kindly to it. People in town can mind their own business. Can they? The question hung in the air between them. They both knew the answer. Morning brought Sheriff Marcus Whitmore to Ezra's door. The man's badge caught sunlight like a warning. His eyes were cold as January creek water. Heard you took in a traveler last night. News travels fast. Fast enough? Whitmore stepped closer. You know what kind of troubles that can bring? What kind of troubles are you talking about, Marcus? The kind that makes good people ask questions about your loyalties, about your judgment. Ezra's jaw tightened. The war was over, but its battles continued in parlors and church pews, in whispered conversations and closed doors. My judgment's my own business. Not when it affects the whole town. Whitmore adjusted his gun belt. The gesture carried meaning beyond comfort. Think careful about the company you keep, Ezra. Some associations can't be undone. The sheriff left without another word. His horse kicked up dust that settled on everything like a curse. Delilah had watched the conversation from the kitchen window. When Ezra returned inside, she was packing the few belongings she carried. I should go. Should you? You heard him. I'm trouble. Ezra poured coffee into 2 cups. The liquid steamed black as midnight. I've seen trouble. This isn't it. You don't know me. I know enough. He set 1 cup before her. She stared at it without drinking. What do you know? I know you walked through a storm to save a child. I know you'd rather face danger than accept charity. I know you're stronger than you think you are. Delilah lifted the cup. Her hands had stopped, shaking. And I know shame when I see it. You don't have to carry it alone. She met his eyes for the first time since the sheriff's visit. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition. I can pay my way. I'm counting on it. The baby stirred in its makeshift cradle. Delilah rose to check on the child. Ezra watched her gentle movements, the care she took with every gesture. What's the baby's name? Delilah hesitated. Another lie prepared itself on her lips. Instead, she chose truth. Thomas, his name is Thomas. The admission cost her something. Ezra saw it in the way her shoulders dropped, the way she touched the child's face. Thomas is lucky to have you. Am I lucky to have him? The question revealed more than she intended. Ezra heard the doubt, the fear, the weight of decisions made in desperate moments. That's between you and God. Delilah smiled for the first time since arriving. It changed her face completely, erased years of hardship, revealed the woman she might have been in a different world. Then I guess we'll find out together. Outside, clouds gathered for another storm. The wind carried whispers from town. Disapproval rode the air like smoke. But inside Ezra's house, 2 broken people began the careful work of trust. Neither knew the secrets the other carried. Neither understood the forces already moving against them. But in that moment, sharing coffee while a child slept safely nearby, they found something worth protecting, something worth the trouble it would bring. 2 weeks passed like prayers whispered in empty churches. Delilah moved through Ezra's house with quiet efficiency. She cooked meals that filled the kitchen with warmth it hadn't known in years. She mended clothes with stitches so small they seemed like secrets sewn into fabric. Thomas grew stronger each day. His cries became less desperate, more demanding. The sound of a child who expected the world to answer. Ezra found excuses to linger in the kitchen, to watch Delilah work. Her hands moved with purpose that spoke of years spent making much from little. She hummed sometimes while she cooked, low melodies that seemed older than memory. You don't have to stay in the house all day. Delilah looked up from the bread, dough she was kneading. Flour dusted her dark hands like snow. People in town might not understand. Let them not understand. She returned to her kneading. Each fold of the dough deliberate, methodical. Understanding's a luxury some folks can't afford. The words carried weight beyond their surface. Ezra heard the years behind them, the choices that taught her caution. What kind of luxury? Delilah shaped the dough into loaves. Her movements never paused, but something in her posture shifted. The kind that gets you killed. Evening brought ritual they both grew to expect. Delilah would feed Thomas while Ezra read aloud from books his wife had collected. Poetry mostly. Verses about love and loss and redemption. Can you read? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Delilah's hand stilled on the baby's back. Some, not much. Never had proper schooling. Would you like to learn more? She looked at him across the lamplight. Suspicion warred with hunger in her eyes. The hunger won. Why would you teach me? Because knowledge is the only thing they can't take from you once you have it. The lessons began the next evening. Ezra brought his wife's books to the kitchen table. Delilah traced letters with her finger like she was drawing maps to freedom. Her mind was sharp as winter wind. She absorbed words like parched earth drinks, rain. Within days she was reading simple sentences. Within a week she was asking about harder books. Your wife collected these? Ezra nodded. The question came while Delilah studied a volume of Whitman's poetry. Her finger followed lines about democracy and brotherhood. She believed in education, said ignorance was the only true sin. What happened to her? The question hung between them like smoke. Ezra closed the book he'd been reading. Childbirth. Lost them both, wife and baby. Delilah's hand moved to Thomas, protective, instinctive. I'm sorry. 2 years now still feels like yesterday. Grief doesn't follow calendars. The observation came quiet, earned through experience rather than sympathy. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence. Thomas slept between them. The lamplight flickered against the walls like memories that refused to die. Boy or girl? Boy. We were going to name him Samuel. Delilah nodded. Understanding passed between them without need for words. They were both caring for children who represented hope in a world determined to crush it. Town began to notice. Merchants who once greeted Ezra with respect now offered cold nods. Women who used to invite him to church socials found reasons to look away. The isolation grew like frost on windows, slow but inevitable. Mrs. Henderson from the general store was the first to speak directly. Folks are talking, Ezra. Folks always talk. This is different. About your house guest. Ezra loaded supplies into his wagon. His movements never hurried, but something in his jaw tightened. My business is my own. Not when it concerns the whole community. How does my housekeeper concern anyone else? Mrs. Henderson glanced around the store. Other customers had stopped their shopping to listen. You know how. The accusation hung unspoken but clear. Ezra finished loading his supplies. He paid without another word. The silence followed him home, like a curse. Delilah was hanging laundry when he returned. White sheets snapped in the wind like surrender flags. She read his expression before he spoke. Bad day in town? Getting worse? She continued hanging clothes, each garment placed with care despite the growing wind. Maybe I should move on. Maybe you should stay. The words surprised them both. Ezra hadn't planned to say them. Delilah hadn't expected to hear them. Staying might cost you everything. Everything's already gone. The admission came quiet. Honest. Delilah turned from the clothesline to study his face. Not everything. What's left? The choice to do right. A sheet broke free from its pins. Delilah chased it across the yard. Ezra helped her catch it. Their hands touched as they folded the fabric. Neither pulled away immediately. Is that what this is, doing right? I don't know what else to call it. That evening brought Sheriff Whitmore back to the ranch. He arrived after dark. His horse's hooves drummed against the hard earth like heartbeats. Delilah saw him coming through the kitchen window. She moved Thomas to the back room. Her face had gone pale as winter sky. Ezra. Whitmore dismounted slowly, his hand rested near his gun. We need to talk. About what? About your house guest. About questions people are asking. What kind of questions? Whitmore stepped closer. The lamplight from the house painted shadows across his face. The kind that make decent folks nervous. Decent folks should mind their own business. This is everyone's business now. The threat was subtle but clear. Ezra felt it like cold wind against his back. What do you want, Marcus? Information about where she came from, where she's going, what she's running from. She's not running from anything. Everyone's running from something out here. Whitmore adjusted his gun belt. The gesture had become his signature, a reminder of the power he carried. Ask around town, Ezra. People remember things. About you. About your sympathies during the war. The words hit like physical blows. Ezra's hands clenched at his sides. The war's over. Is it? Whitmore mounted his horse. The animal danced sideways, sensing tension. Be careful who you trust. Some associations can't be forgiven. After the sheriff left, Ezra found Delilah in the kitchen. She sat at the table with Thomas in her lap. Her hands shook slightly as she rocked the child. You heard? Enough. He knows something. What could he know? Delilah looked up. Her eyes held secrets that went deeper than shame. More than we can afford. The admission hung between them like smoke. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, two people faced the reality that safety was an illusion they could no longer maintain. We could leave. Tonight. Running makes you look guilty. Staying might make us dead. Ezra sat across from her. The table that had hosted their reading lessons now felt like a barrier. Then we face whatever comes. Together? The question carried more weight than either expected. It asked about more than shared danger, it asked about shared futures. If you'll have me? Delilah studied his face in the lamplight. She saw honesty there. And something else. Something that scared and comforted her in equal measure. I'm not who you think I am. Neither am I. The things I've done, the reasons I'm here, don't matter. They will when the truth comes out. Ezra reached across the table. His hand covered hers. Then we'll face the truth too. Outside, storm clouds gathered like judgment. Inside, two broken people made promises they weren't sure they could keep. But for now, in the lamplight with a child sleeping peacefully between them, those promises felt like enough. The wind carried whispers from town. Disapproval and suspicion rode the air like smoke. But it also carried something else. The possibility that love could grow in the hardest ground. That two people could find each other even in the darkest times. Whether that possibility would survive what was coming remained to be seen. The truth came like morning frost. Inevitable. Quiet. Deadly. Ezra found Delilah meeting Sheriff Whitmore behind the barn 3 days after their promise to face whatever came together. She stood with her back straight, her hands clasped before her like she was praying. Whitmore leaned against his horse. His smile was a knife in the darkness. Ezra watched from the shadows, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The woman he was learning to love was betraying him to the man who wanted to destroy them both. The meeting lasted 10 minutes. Delilah handed Whitmore a folded paper. He read it by moonlight, nodded, mounted his horse without another word. Delilah stood alone in the darkness long after the sheriff rode away. Her shoulders shook, not from cold. Ezra retreated to the house. He sat at the kitchen table where they had shared meals and reading lessons and quiet conversations about hope. The wood grain blurred beneath his stare. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford twice. When Delilah returned, she found him waiting. How long? She stopped in the doorway. Her face went pale as winter sky. Ezra. How long have you been feeding him information? The question hung between them like smoke. Delilah closed the door. Her hands trembled on the latch. Since the second week. The admission hit him like a physical blow. Every shared moment, every growing feeling, built on lies. What does he want? Information about your activities, your visitors, your past. And you gave it to him. Delilah moved to the stove. She poured coffee with careful movements. Her hands shook slightly as she set 2 cups on the table. I gave him what he needed to hear. Which was? That you're a grieving widower who keeps to himself. That you have no visitors. That your past is exactly what it appears to be. Ezra looked up. Something in her tone didn't match the betrayal he'd witnessed. All lies. All true, as far as he knows. Understanding crept into the space between them like dawn light. Ezra studied her face in the lamplight. What aren't you telling me? Delilah sat across from him. The table that had brought them together now felt like a courtroom. He knows who I am, where I came from, what I did. What did you do? Killed a man who tried to force himself on me, in Mississippi. There's a bounty. The words came flat, matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. Self-defense. Doesn't matter, not for someone like me. Ezra reached across the table, his hand covered hers. So you made a deal. I made a choice, him or you. And you chose me. I chose us. The distinction mattered. Ezra felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Understanding. What else does he want? Everything. Your land, your cattle, your reputation. Why? Because men like him take what they want, and right now he wants what you have. Outside wind rattled the windows. Inside, 2 people faced the complexity of survival in a world that offered no simple choices. There's something else. Delilah's voice went quieter, more careful. About Thomas. Ezra waited. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. He's not my son. The admission came so softly he almost missed it. Almost. Whose is he? A woman named Martha. We escaped together from the same plantation. She died 2 days into our journey. Made me promise to keep him safe. Everything about Delilah's devotion to the child suddenly made sense. The fierce protection, the careful attention, the willingness to sacrifice everything. You've been raising another woman's child. I've been raising my son. Blood doesn't make family. Ezra looked toward the back room where Thomas slept. The child who had brought them together, who had given them both something to protect beyond themselves. Does Whitmore know? Not yet, but he's asking questions. What kind of questions? About bounties, about missing property, about people who might pay to get their property back. The words carried implications that made Ezra's stomach turn. In some places, some minds, a child could still be considered property. We need to tell him the truth. What truth? About me. About what I've been doing here. Delilah studied his face. She saw something there she hadn't expected. Resolution. What have you been doing here? Ezra rose from the table. He walked to the window. Outside, darkness hid the graves scattered across his property. Graves that held more than cattle. Running a station. What kind of station? The kind that helps people like you get north. The revelation hit Delilah like cold water. She looked around the kitchen with new eyes. The isolated location. The careful hospitality. The willingness to help a stranger. How many? Dozens. Over the years. Some made it through, some didn't. The graves. People who died seeking freedom, including Martha. Delilah's hand went to her throat. The woman who had entrusted her with Thomas, who had died believing her child would find safety. She made it this far. Fever took her a mile from here. You buried her under the oak tree by the creek. I was here before. 3 months ago, with Martha and Thomas. You asked for help. Memory flooded back. The desperate flight, the woman growing weaker each day, the isolated ranch that seemed like sanctuary. You turned us away. I thought it was too dangerous. Confederate sympathizers had been watching. I couldn't risk exposing the others. So Martha died. So Martha died. The words carried weight that bent both their backs. Guilt and regret, and the terrible mathematics of survival. Is that why you helped me? Guilt? I helped you because it was right. I should have helped you both before. Delilah absorbed this new understanding. It reframed everything about their relationship, every kindness, every growing feeling. What does this mean for Whitmore? It means we're both dead if he finds out. And if he doesn't, then we find a way to stop him. Delilah pulled the latest note from her pocket, the one she'd planned to give Whitmore. I've been documenting everything, his visits, his questions, his threats. Ezra read the paper. Dense handwriting covered both sides. Dates, times, exact quotes. You've been building a case. I've been building evidence. For what? For the federal marshals who are already investigating him. The revelation changed everything. Again. Ezra looked at the woman across from him with new respect. How long have you been planning this? Since the first week. Since I realized what kind of man he is. And what kind of man is he? The kind who steals land from people who can't fight back, who sells information to Confederate holdouts, who uses his badge to build his own empire. Outside, horses approached, multiple riders, moving fast. Delilah rose from the table. Her face had gone pale again. That's not Whitmore. How do you know? Because he always rides alone. Ezra moved to the window. 3 men on horseback approached through the darkness. Their faces were hard as winter ground. Do you recognize them? One of them. Who? Delilah lifted Thomas from his cradle. She wrapped him carefully in blankets. The man who owns Martha's son. The words hit Ezra like a physical blow. The child they had both learned to love wasn't just orphaned. He was claimed. His father? His master. The distinction carried implications that made the approaching danger personal. They weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for the right to protect a child who had already lost too much. The riders stopped outside. Voices carried through the night air. Planning voices. Hunting voices. What do we do? Delilah looked at Ezra across the lamplight. The kitchen that had become their sanctuary now felt like a trap. We end this. How? Together. She handed him Martha's son. Thomas stirred in his arms but didn't wake. Trust incarnate. Whatever happens, he survives. Whatever happens, we all survive. Outside, the men dismounted. Inside, 2 people who had found love in the hardest ground prepared to fight for the only family they had left. The wind carried whispers of violence. But it also carried something else. The possibility that love could triumph over hatred. That 2 broken people could protect what mattered most. Whether that possibility would survive the next hour remained to be seen. The knock came gentle, respectful. Nothing like what Ezra expected from bounty hunters. Mr. McCain, my name is Samuel Washington. I'm looking for my son. Ezra opened the door to find a tall man with calloused hands and careful eyes. Behind him stood 2 other men, not hired guns, farmers by the look of them. Your son? Thomas. He'd be traveling with a woman named Delilah. His mother died on the road north. Delilah promised to keep him safe. Understanding hit Ezra like dawn light. Not a master come to reclaim property, a father searching for his child. Delilah appeared in the doorway behind Ezra. Thomas slept, in her arms. Samuel's face transformed when he saw them both. Martha's boy. Your boy. Samuel stepped forward. His movements were careful, respectful of the bond he could see between woman and child. Is he well? He's perfect. Delilah's voice carried pride and pain in equal measure. She had raised this child, loved him, now faced losing him to his rightful father. May I? She placed Thomas in Samuel's arms. The child stirred, opened dark eyes that matched his father's exactly. Father and son studied each other like they were memorizing faces. He looks like Martha. He has her spirit. Samuel looked at Delilah with gratitude that went deeper than words. Thank you for keeping my promise to her. She was a good woman. She was my wife. The words reframed everything again. Not just a woman who died in flight. A wife. A mother. A loss that carved holes in multiple hearts. There's something else. Samuel's voice grew serious. Federal marshals are coming, tonight, following reports about illegal land seizures. Whitmore, among others. There's been a conspiracy, stealing property from folks who can't fight back legally. Ezra felt pieces clicking together. The pressure from town, the threats, the systematic isolation. They want my ranch. They want everything. Your land was just the biggest prize. One of Samuel's companions stepped forward. A badge glinted on his chest. Deputy Marshal James Carter. We've been investigating Sheriff Whitmore for 6 months. Miss Washington's reports provided the evidence we needed. Delilah looked surprised. You got my letters? Everyone. Detailed documentation of threats, extortion, and conspiracy. Then why didn't you act sooner? We needed proof, and witnesses willing to testify. In the distance, more horses approached. This time the hoofbeats carried urgency, anger. That'll be Whitmore. Carter's hand moved to his weapon. He knows we're here. How many men does he have? Too many. But not as many as he thinks. Carter whistled sharp and low. Answering whistles came from the darkness around the ranch. Positioned men, hidden backup. You set a trap. We set justice. Whitmore rode hard into the yard. Behind him came 5, men with guns drawn and faces set for violence. They pulled up short when they saw the federal badges. Carter, what brings federal marshals to my territory? Official business, Marcus. The kind that involves handcuffs. Whitmore's eyes darted, between the faces surrounding him. He was outnumbered but not outgunned. On what charges? Conspiracy, extortion, theft of federal land grants. You got no proof. Carter held up Delilah's letters. Months of careful documentation. We got plenty. The standoff stretched like a held breath. Men on horses facing men on foot. Truth facing corruption. The night air crackled with tension. Miss Washington, step away from those men. Whitmore's voice carried command he no longer possessed. She's under federal protection. She's a wanted fugitive. She's a witness, and the bounty you're thinking about was posted by a dead man. Whitmore's face went pale. His trump card had been played and beaten. How? William Hayes died of fever 2 weeks after posting that bounty. Natural causes. Makes the warrant invalid. Relief flooded Delilah's face. The fear she'd carried for months evaporated like morning mist. You're free to go wherever you want. I want to stay here. She looked at Ezra. He looked back. 2 people who had found each other in the hardest circumstances. Then you stay. Whitmore made his choice. His hand dropped toward his gun. Carter's shot took him in the shoulder before he could draw. The sheriff tumbled from his horse onto ground that had seen too much violence already. His men surrendered without firing a shot. Justice sometimes came quiet. Sometimes it came with handcuffs and federal marshals. Tonight it came with both. Samuel held Thomas against his chest. The child had slept through everything. Innocence protected by love and luck. What happens now? Now you all start over. Carter supervised the arrest of Whitmore's men. The conspiracy had involved half the county. Unraveling it would take months. What about Thomas? Samuel looked at his son. then at Delilah, then at Ezra. I've been alone since Martha died. Raising a child takes more than one person. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe Thomas needs more family than just his father. Hope flickered in Delilah's eyes. Dangerous hope. You'd share him? I'd share everything, if you'll have us. Ezra studied the three faces in the lamplight. A father, a woman who had sacrificed everything for love, a child who deserved all the protection they could give. There's room here for everyone. Even after everything that's happened? Especially after everything that's happened. Dawn found them making plans around the kitchen table. Samuel would stay through winter, help rebuild what Whitmore's conspiracy had damaged. They would be a family, unconventional but real. Thomas woke hungry and demanding. Delilah fed him while Samuel and Ezra discussed cattle and crops and the work of building new lives on old ground. You think this can work? I think love works any way it can. 6 months later, California hills rolled green under spring sky. A small cabin sat tucked between oak trees and wildflowers. Delilah tended a garden while Ezra repaired fence posts. Samuel worked with the horses in a paddock nearby. Thomas ran between them on unsteady legs. His laughter carried on the wind like music. A letter arrived with the weekly mail. Delilah read it twice before calling the men. It's from the territorial court. They gathered around the kitchen table. The same ritual, different stakes. Samuel Washington, legal father. Delilah Washington, legal mother. Ezra McCain, legal guardian. Understanding dawned slowly. Samuel had filed papers, made their unusual family official in the eyes of the law. We're all Thomas's parents now. All of us. Thomas chose that moment to take his first real steps. He walked from Samuel to Delilah, to Ezra. Each caught him. Each passed him on. A circle of protection and love. Some kinds of love are worth begging for. Delilah spoke the words to the wind, to the hills, to the family they had chosen and fought for and built from nothing. Samuel lifted Thomas onto his shoulders. The child laughed and reached for clouds. And some kinds are worth sharing. The four of them stood together in the California sunshine, a family forged by loss and choice and the kind of courage that risks everything for love. In the distance, more families were arriving, former slaves and abolitionists and people seeking second chances, building communities where unusual love could flourish, where children could grow up free, where the past could finally rest in peace. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.